If you say his name 3 times, he will appear. Beetlejuice.
The juice is loose.
Overall, I would consider myself to be a big Tim Burton fan, but for me personally, there's a huge divide between the first half of his career and the second half of his career. In the first half, he's made a bunch of movies that I consider to be magnificent masterpieces. Ed Wood is one of my favorite movies of all time, not just Tim Burton movies, but just films in general. The original Beetlejuice is so fun, so unique. I watched it a million times when I was a kid, watched it with my dad a bunch, just completely laughed my ass off at the antics of Michael Keaton playing that character. But anyways, what I'm trying to say is that the first half of his career, between Beetlejuice and Ed Wood and Sleepy Hollow and Mars Attacks, I love Mars Attacks, I don't care what anyone says, that movie's fucking awesome. And all of those films I love. But then once he gets to like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, everything from that point on, I'm just not really a big fan of, minus a few outliers. Like I really like Frankenweenie and a couple of other things. But for the most part, post 2005, Tim Burton has been usually let down after let down after let down for me. So when he's coming back to do Beetlejuice 2, which is only the second sequel that he's ever done besides Batman Returns, it was kind of one of those moments where I'm like, is this going to be the one? Like, is he going to recapture that feeling of the original movie and bring us back to the golden era of Tim Burton? Or is it going to feel like another Dark Shadows? And the reality for me personally is it's somewhere in the middle. Because I do have a lot of positive to say about this movie, but I feel like I also have far more negative. But before I get into the specifics, and I'm going to put a warning up before I get into spoilers, I'm just going to kind of give you my general thoughts after seeing it today. For the main positives of this movie that I'll say is it definitely feels like every single actor that's in this movie, and probably everybody behind the scenes, Tim Burton as well, everybody seems to be having a great time filming this. There's a bunch of cameos from other Tim Burton alumni that have been in other Tim Burton movies, as well as the main cast. They all feel like they're just genuinely having a great time and trying to give you a solid amount of entertainment. And that's the biggest positive I can say about this movie, is that it was entertaining. For as long as this movie was, an hour and a half, maybe an hour, 40 minutes, I'm not sure, it was entertaining, right? Like there's a lot of fun sequences. There's some moments that really made me laugh. You definitely go back into that world of the undead and you get to see a little bit more of it that we saw in the first movie. You get a little bit more expansion on the things that kind of happen behind the scenes in the world of the dead. But then alongside that, although there is, CGI and that, sort of digital effects in the movie, because it's kind of unavoidable, I guess, in 2024. Not really, but, whatever. But I will say I give credit due to the effort that was put in to go with a lot of practical effects. Like when we see the sandworm snake, it still looks like the sort of stop motion that was in the first one. So it's at least consistent in its effects. It's not like everything changed. It's like the Star Wars prequels where now everything looks completely different as far as technology and special effects goes. It seems relatively consistent to the first movie in terms of like the look, the vibe, the feel of the practical effects, and like the way that the world of the dead works. You still get the handbook for the recently deceased, you still get the check-in station, you just get a little bit more kind of added on to that. So all of that stuff was great. And obviously the actors' performances as well. Seeing Lydia Dietz, Winona Ryder's character, now as an adult, I was a little bit hesitant to see what that would be like, because when you take somebody that's so well established as this teenage kind of outcast angsty character, and that's how I know Lydia Dietz, right? And now all of a sudden I'm going to catch up with her and she's like 50 years old. That's quite the adjustment to do in your brain, but I feel like they really did a good job with the organic kind of evolution of her character, where she's still Lydia Dietz, but now she has this extra responsibility, right? And now she has kind of mended her relationship with her stepmother, played by Catherine O'Hara, who returns in this movie too. And now she's dealing with a daughter of her own, who also has just as many issues with her as she had with her stepmom. So there's kind of like this multi-generational thing where it's like, she's still the same person, she's still the same character, but now she has this added responsibility on top of everything else of trying to navigate being a parent. And I thought that they did a really good job with that. On top of that as well, Michael Keaton as Beetlejuice is perfect. I mean, he's Beetlejuice, and it's just like, there's nothing bad to say about that. He slips right back into the role, which is crazy when you consider this is like 30 some years later. Like the first Beetlejuice came out the year before I was born. I was born in 89. It came out in 88. So like that's how long it's been. My entire existence has been since Michael Keaton has played Beetlejuice, but now he is playing him again, and he feels the same. His mannerisms are the same. His voice is the same. His physicality is the same. The jokes are just as like ridiculous and raunchy and over the top. And all the Beetlejuice scenes in Beetlejuice Beetlejuice are very Beetlejuicy. But to kind of sum up the plot and the general premise is extremely difficult. One, to do it without spoilers, and also just to sum up the general plot, because I feel like the biggest issue this movie has, and it is such a huge issue for me, is what is happening within the storyline of this movie. Because it felt like it took a long time before the movie even had a chance to get started. There's all these different moving plot threads that are happening. There's a story that's happening in the world of the dead, and there's a story that's happening with a death in the family of our main characters. And then there's also a story that's happening with Willem Dafoe, who's in the movie, and a story that's happening with Monica Bellucci that's in the movie, and a story that's happening with Jenna Ortega's character that is in a relationship or getting into a relationship with another character, and the person that Lydia is dating, who wants to marry her, who might not be that good of a person to begin with, and also the person that was the father of Jenna Ortega's character and how he's not around and what happened with that. And all of these things are all introduced at the same time, like one after the other. And you're not really sure what the main story of the movie is. And I think that's this movie's biggest problem. The story of the original movie, I think the beauty is in its simplicity, right? This couple dies and they're trying to figure out what's going on, and they realize that they're ghosts. And then new people start to move into their house and they want the new people to leave, right? So they try desperately to get them to leave themselves. They fail, and then they hire Beetlejuice and shit goes awry, right? It's a very simple premise that is allowed to have kind of all these extra bits of, the afterlife and going to the check-in station, dealing with kind of the silly antics. But generally it's a story about, two characters trying to get another family out of their house. And they also become like surrogate parents to Lydia, who's having a strange relationship with her actual parents, which is a relationship that she begins to mend as the movie, continues, with sort of like these other parents, kind of guiding her along the way, right? Having that sort of guiding force that she never had. Well, the Maitlands, those two main characters of Beetlejuice, are not in this movie, and they're explained away in like one very quick line of dialogue that is pretty much the laziest piece of writing that you could possibly do in any story ever to explain something. I kind of just want to spoil it for you, but I'll wait until I get into the spoiler section. But they explain why the Maitlands aren't in the house anymore. And man, they could have done better. I think for a movie like this, there are particular sequences that I like the one of the very first scenes with Beetlejuice, where he's kind of playing the role of a couples therapist, was really, really funny. I think that was the best scene of the movie for me, and actually really the only scene that felt like traditional Beetlejuice. Like that felt like what it needed to be. But I wish that the build up to Beetlejuice would have been a little bit better. He kind of just shows up in the movie. And I know in the original film that there's a couple of scenes of him that are just kind of nonchalant before his big reveal. But in this one, it really felt like there was just no build up. There was no suspense. There was no kind of excitement to get to Beetlejuice. It's just like, oh, there he is. And the thing that really pissed me off also was that they failed to double down on what would have been the best joke that you could have ever done for a sequel that is 30 years in the making. Because you know how at the end of the original Beetlejuice, he's sitting at the in the check-in room, and he's got the really long number, and he's waiting for his number to be called? How funny would it have been if your introduction to Beetlejuice was having his number actually be called? Like, he literally had to wait 30 years. But they don't do that joke. And it just kind of upset me that they didn't do that. But it also upset me just the way that Beetlejuice was just kind of thrown into the movie instead of like having a big reveal. And after watching the entire film and figuring out how all the plot lines kind of converge, you really could have simplified this movie to one singular plot line that I think would have worked a lot better for the film in general. To get to it, I'll have to wait until I get into spoilers, but that's the biggest issue that I had, is that there's all these moving pieces, but most of it doesn't matter. And the things that I wish it would have doubled down and focused on and kept the story a little bit more basic, it kind of constantly strays away from that. There's so many moments in the movie in like the first half of the film where you don't really know what to attach yourself to, and it like continues to build and you think it's going to go somewhere, and then it deviates to start something else, and then you think that's going to build, and then it deviates again to start something else. And that just continues to happen for like the first, not just like the first half hour, but the first half of the movie, where you're just kind of constantly waiting for it to get started. There's so many things that are built up that you think are going to be important as well that are not elaborated on or just fail to have a satisfying conclusion. And because of that, things just become a little bit of a disappointment. And one or two little disappointments in a movie isn't really a big deal, but when the little disappointments start to stack up on top of one another, that's kind of what happened with me with this movie, where after it ended, although there were particular scenes that I liked, particular moments that I liked, and the performances from the actors I liked, when I look at it as an overall movie, as an overall story, it's not like this overarching, enjoyable experience like the first movie is. The first movie continues to expand and, you know, stays consistent the entire way through, where I feel like this one is such a mixed bag, where it's like, okay, this scene is a lot of fun, this scene goes nowhere, this plot point goes nowhere, this doesn't really make a lot of sense. And I know that at the end of the day, people are going to say, well, it's a comedy, you're not supposed to think too hard about it. And I always think that that's a little bit of a cop-out, because even though a movie may be a comedy, it still has to remain consistent within what it's presenting to you as the audience, you know? And if it's going to be just like, you know, to the point where nothing matters, well, then it's harder to attach yourself to the characters of what's going on, and then it just becomes like you're watching random sketch comedy, and that's not particularly what I want out of a movie. You know what I mean? So again, without going into spoilers, I don't know quite how to recommend this movie, because I guess if you're like me and, you know, you watched Beetlejuice a bunch of times when you were a kid, I have so many great memories of watching that movie and laughing my ass off at it and watching it with my dad. And I think I even dressed up as Beetlejuice once when I was a kid. I don't think any pictures exist though, so that's I'm okay with that. But like I'm pretty sure I like made my parents put on like white makeup with like the green mold on me when I was a kid one time. So if you're so deeply attached to that original movie, I think that this is worth checking out, just for the very fact that you get to see Michael Keaton be Beetlejuice again, and that aspect is fun. And I do think they did a good job with expanding Lydia's character now as an adult, and her relationship with her daughter, I think, kind of parallels the relationship that she had with Catherine O'Hara's character from the first movie, and she's still in this movie too. Oh, also, really fun thing, I won't spoil it all the way, but the actor Jeffrey Jones, who, if you guys don't know, you can look it up if you want to. I'd recommend that you don't, but he got into, he did some bad shit in real life, not a good person, total piece of shit. So how they deal with his character in this movie, the workarounds that they did to not have the actor in the movie, I thought were brilliant. I thought it was hilarious. They do two different things to have the character in the movie without the actor. And I gotta say, bravo for creativity of adding the Jeffrey Jones character in it without having to put the actor in it. Really good job. Anyways, from this point forward, I'm gonna go into spoilers, so I'm gonna talk about specifics, and this will be a lot easier to talk about what I disliked about the movie, because it requires spoilers to be able to talk about it. So if you care about spoilers, if you want to see it for yourself, make up your own opinion, go do that before you watch this point of the video. You have been warned. I'm going to talk about spoilers now. Okay, so yes, I think the biggest issue with this movie is that there are too many plot lines that are happening, and most of them go nowhere, and it's very, very disappointing. For example, in the beginning of the movie, there is this resurrection scene of Monica Bellucci's character. Monica Bellucci is awesome, and she looks fucking awesome. She's like this ghost Frankenstein type character. You know, she falls out of, Danny DeVito has a cameo and knocks her out of her, you know, holding cell of her box or whatever, and she stitches her body up together, and she's out for vengeance against Beetlejuice for some reason, and we're not supposed to know why yet, right? And that whole sequence was amazing. I was so happy to see it, and Monica Bellucci is great. After that scene, She does practically nothing the entire movie except walk around menacingly. She kills some ancillary characters that we don't care about, and there's this whole like thing of her coming after Beetlejuice because of a backstory of when they were human. And I hated this as well. So, well, let me talk about see, there's so many things I want to talk about. So let me talk about the Monica Bellucci thing. So Monica Bellucci, I think, is dating Tim Burton right now. And you know how when Tim Burton was dating Helena Bonham Carter, she was prominently featured in all of his movies? It kind of feels like the only reason she's in this movie is because she is currently dating Tim Burton, and he's like, hey, I got a hot girlfriend, hot wife. I'm going to put her in the movie. Of which I respect, all right? And if I was making movies and I had a hot wife, I would also cast her in all my movies. I get it. It's fine. But her character has, like, no impact on the story whatsoever. Like, you could take that plot line out, you could take that storyline out, and it wouldn't make a difference. The same thing is true with Willem Dafoe's character, who plays this passed away actor who is now a detective in the afterlife, who's hunting her down as well as hunting Beetlejuice down because she's coming after Beetlejuice. But again, he has no consequence on the story. And even the big scene in the wedding chapel at the end of the movie where all the storylines converge, he gets immediately frozen and he plays no impact in the story whatsoever. Love Monica Bellucci, love Willem Dafoe, love both those actors. But they had nothing to do here, and it just seemed to waste time and also confuse the audience a little bit as to what storyline is actually going to be important here. Didn't feel like it needed to be here whatsoever. The other reason I didn't like it was because we do get a backstory of Beetlejuice, to a degree. We get a backstory of Beetlejuice as a human, and they do this kind of joke history lesson where it's like overdubbed and it's filmed like an old school, black and white movie. And the aesthetic of it is really cool. But there's something about that bothers me. And again, I know it's a comedy, so like don't take it too seriously, but I don't want to know a backstory of Beetlejuice. I don't want to see Beetlejuice as a human. I think Beetlejuice works so much better when he's like this enigma. Right? Like, that he was probably human one time, right? He's a ghost. He's a demon. He's a thing. Like, what is he? I don't want to know what he is. He's just Beetlejuice. I don't want to know that Beetlejuice was once human. Yes, I assume that, but I don't want it confirmed. It's like when they gave the backstory to the Cenobites in Hellraiser. It's like, yeah, I know he was probably once a human, but I don't want to know the specifics about it. I think it's cooler when it's more of a mystery, when it's more of a enigma, when you get to kind of guess, like, how old is Beetlejuice? Is he from, like, modern times? Is he from ancient times? Is he from, you know what I mean? Like, you don't want to know the real history of Beetlejuice. At least I don't. So that scene was like a total bummer for me. It's like, I don't want to see that. The plot line as well with the character that is dating Lydia Dietz and wanting to marry her. Yeah, he's an asshole, and you get that from the beginning, but he took up, I think, way too much screen time as well. And I think the story should have focused on the simplicity of the family dynamic, because the whole story starts where Lydia's father has passed away, right? And I love, okay, so now that I'm in spoilers, I love that they did the Jeffrey Jones character by one stop motion animation. Hilarious. And then once he was dead, since he got eaten by a shark, it bit off the top half of his body, so he's literally just a torso walking around. Hilarious. I gotta say, that was awesome. That was such a brilliant way to handle that situation. Because, like, it's not the character that did anything wrong. It's the dirtbag actor. So it's like, the character, he was a chill dude, right? So, like, he deserves to still be in there. So I like the way that they handled that with the character. I thought it was creative. I thought it was funny. Totally was on board with that. But, yeah, the whole story starts with this funeral, right, that happens. And, Lydia has been having a career with the fact that she can see ghosts. And Jenna Ortega, her daughter, has never, seen a ghost, or doesn't think that she's ever seen a ghost, doesn't really believe her mother. And I like that aspect of that dynamic because it kind of shifts the perspective where, Lydia was the strange one that didn't really fit in with her stepmom and like normal dad. And now it's like, Jenna Ortega's character is a little bit more, put together, I guess, than Lydia was as a teenager, but they still have that estranged relationship. So it worked very well for me. And I think the story should have focused more on that, more on the mother-daughter dynamic. daughter, mother, grandmother dynamic, the three generations, that's where like the core of your story was. That's where the heart of your story was. And all the other complications of Monica Bellucci's character and the guy that wants to marry Lydia and Willem Dafoe and all that stuff could have been put aside for this main, core story, I think. And there was a great moment where Lydia meets a boy and, they start to hit it off. And then she finds out the boy is actually dead. But not only is he dead, he's one of the villains of the movie. He killed his parents and then accidentally died himself. And he tricks Lydia to swap basically her soul for his soul so that he could come back to life. That's a really cool idea. And he takes, I keep calling her Lydia. What's her name? Astrid? I forget what her character's name was. I think it's Astrid. So he takes her into the afterlife, right? And so now Lydia has to go to Beetlejuice for help. That's her only access into that world. And that's all you need. That's the only setup you need. You need the estranged relationship between mother and daughter. You need the daughter to be won over by this guy, him to pull one over on her, take her into the afterlife. Now Lydia's like, I have to go rescue my daughter. How do I do this? What is my access point to the afterlife? It's Beetlejuice. That is all you need. And then that first reveal of her having to go to if you hadn't shown Beetlejuice in the movie up until that point, until Lydia is so desperate she has to go to Beetlejuice for help, that would have been the perfect introduction to Beetlejuice back into this world. But that happens like more than halfway through the film, and Beetlejuice has already been in a bunch of scenes before then. If they would have held off, and not done those other plot points and then gone to that scene, I feel like that would have been such a cathartic moment for the audience where it's like Lydia is forced to go to Beetlejuice and now we finally get to see him again, But then there's also moments that don't make any sense. Like there's this whole plot point about the only ghost that Lydia isn't able to see is Astrid's father, because he passed away before the movie even began. But then they meet him in the afterlife. And they don't explain why she was never able to see him. I thought the whole thing was going to be like, what if he didn't really die? What if they just thought that he died because nobody ever found his body? And the reason that she couldn't see him being a ghost is because he never was one. And that he would show up later in the movie. And then that's who Lydia would get with. Instead of the douchebag guy that's trying to marry her, her past love would come back into her life. But they don't do that. It turns out he is actually dead. And they remove kind of any kind of emotional catharsis with that because they don't explain why she never saw him, and it's kind of played off a little bit more as a joke. I know the movie's a comedy, I know, but like he has all the piranhas attached to him still, so it's kind of just one of those moments where it just does not land. It just doesn't really land. Then when we get to the climax of the movie, where they kind of parallel the climax of the original, where it's another wedding chapel kind of thing. Also disappointed they didn't bring back the priest from the original Beetlejuice because I love that little dude. And it's all right. The finale is okay, but everything is wrapped up so quick. Like Monica Bellucci shows up and then she's eaten by a worm real quick. Willem Dafoe shows up, gets frozen, gets unfrozen. Beetlejuice just explodes. And all things considered, even though there's some funny scenes, like I said, I love the couples therapy scene, and I love the baby Beetlejuice. I thought that was hysterical. The little anytime you get like a little menacing little zombie baby character, I usually am like, I laugh at that shit, till the end of the day. I don't know why. Like if you watch the movie Dead Alive, it's something about that. I just enjoy it. So that was cool. And there's a couple other cool scenes, and like I said, I love the whole storyline with Jenna Ortega's character and her being kind of, tricked into going into the afterlife and forfeiting her life, and then the rescue mission. But it's just such a small portion of the movie where I feel like that should have been the main focus. So I guess at the end of the day, it's not one of Tim Burton's worst movies. He's got many, many worse movies. But he also has many, many better movies. It's very mid-tier. And I was a little bit disappointed by that fact because I really wanted to love this movie. Because I love Beetlejuice. And I love the first half of Tim Burton's career. Like he's got so many movies I love. And I just really wanted this to be the movie that made me go, yo, Tim Burton still got the sauce. He still has sauce. I just don't think he has the sauce. But anyways, guys, what did you think of Beetlejuice? If you have seen it, do you think that it's a worthy sequel? Do you think it pales in comparison to the original? Do you think it's at least entertaining? I thought it was at least entertaining. just wasn't quite as good as I wanted it to be. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you like this review, give it a thumbs up, comment, subscribe to the channel if you want to stick around and see more. I'd appreciate it if you did so. And if you want to support the channel on a deeper level, I have Patreon, channel memberships, merch store, and all that stuff linked down below. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll talk to you later.